Welcome, everybody. I'm so happy to see so many people joining us. This is going to be a very interesting discussion tonight. We're focusing on the Green Amendment. It's really timely because last month we had some speakers that were talking about veterans who were exposed to particulate matter, toxic, airborne, waterborne contaminants during their service. And it's had a terrible effect on their health as they come back home and grow up and grow a little bit older. And that's really kind of what we're talking about here. We want people to have access to clean air and clean water in New Mexico. So we've got veterans who have served overseas and who have certain disabilities and illnesses, and they come back here, but they should be safe here, as everybody else should. We're a beautiful state, and we should have clean air and clean water. So we are very happy to have Maya Van Rosen and Representative Joanne Ferrari from House District 37 on board tonight. And we want to hear what you have to say about the Green Amendment. And then we have been talking this up, ladies, for about 3-4 weeks. And I've heard from a number of people, and not all of them can join us tonight. And some of them have some real concerns about this. So I forwarded those questions to Molly to share with you, and we'd love to have you address this. You know, I think the most robust presentation you can have is when you talk about the benefits, but also some of the limitations, and address what people who are concerned or hesitant to support this have to say. So with that, I'd like to have us start up. So Maya, do you want to kick us off here?
Well, if you don't mind, this is, I'd like to go ahead and just give you some general information about the Green Amendment
Awesome.
to make sure everybody understands, what this is. And the New Mexico Green Amendment will add to the Bill of Rights section of our Constitution a constitutional right to clean and healthy environment, and it will establish a clear trustee obligation on New Mexico government officials to protect the state's natural resources for the benefit of both present and future generations. That's why we call it the Green Amendment for the generations. And by placing environmental rights in our Constitution's Bill of Rights, we are ensuring they are given the same legal and constitutional standing as other inalienable rights of fundamental importance to all New Mexicans. And we all recognize the importance of protecting our speech rights, our religious freedoms, and our civil rights. And it is just as important to protect the rights of our people to clean water and air, a healthy climate and environment. And having a New Mexico Green Amendment will help ensure that existing environmental laws and regulations are implemented to their full potential. And it will also provide a basis for advancing new needed protections. And it will also make clear that protecting environmental rights is the duty of all government officials, not just our legislature. And the amendment will not undermine economic development in our state. It will just make sure that economic, industry, and business growth has to protect our environment, which is itself essential to a healthy economy. And it's essential for the health, safety, and happiness of all New Mexicans. So with that, Maya can add a few more bits of information about how she's been working on this, not only in New Mexico, but other states.
Great. So thank you so much, Representative Ferrari. That was really superb. Let me just call it my PowerPoint. And I think you're going to hear a little bit of repetition here. But then what I'm going to do, I'm going to be a little bit mindful of where we are on time. If there's some time, I might go through a few of the decisions that have happened in Pennsylvania and Montana to give some people examples of how the Green Amendments have actually been used in the states where they exist. But I want to make sure that I leave time and space for Senator Pope, because along with Representative Ferrari, Senator Pope is one of our lead champions on the New Mexico Green Amendment, and he was graciously able to join with us this evening, and will be offering his perspective and remarks as well. And he has a lot as well of substance to contribute to this. So we'll see how it goes. And Claudia, in terms of the questions, they only came to me late in the day. And I have a full plate of work, as you can imagine. So when we get to the Q&A, if you would like to ask the questions on the spot, that would be terrific. If others want to ask questions, that would be terrific. And we can just handle it through Q&A. And that way, everybody has context rather than me reading off some email off to the side. So I think hopefully
that sounds great. That sounds really good, Maya. And I just want to encourage anyone in the audience, if you've got some questions, don't put them in chat, put them in the Q&A. We are very fortunate to be able to use Democratic Party of Bernalillo County's webinar. And that's where we're going to be reading questions from. So thanks so much, Maya, please.
Yeah. And I do want to acknowledge in the audience is Nicole Ilanovich and Athena Christodoulou, who have been really key leaders in our New Mexico Green Amendments Coalition and helping in the week in, week out discussions to talk about how to advance this Green Amendment and really lift up the work of Representative Ferrari, Senator Cedillo Lopez, Senator Pope, and the other 23 senators and representatives we have in New Mexico who are championing this powerful idea. So I am Maya Van Rossum. I am the founder of the National Green Amendments for the Generations movement. I wrote a book called The Green Amendment that lays out what this concept is and how it makes a difference. But I want you to know that the founding of this movement really is an outgrowth of my 27 years of work as an environmental activist and attorney, working as the Delaware Riverkeeper, leading a 4-state organization called the Delaware Riverkeeper Network. And it is through experiencing the power of this kind of constitutional amendment that I have gone on this journey of advancing this idea nationwide and had the joy and honor of meeting up with so many powerful activists and advocates and legislative leaders here in New Mexico who are helping to lead the path, not just in New Mexico, but nationwide. And really, in sum, what we really are talking about doing here is raising up the rights of all the people of New Mexico, including present and future generations, raising up the rights of all the people of New Mexico to clean water, clean air, a stable climate, and healthy environments. So they are given the same highest powerful constitutional and legal recognition as the other fundamental rights that we hold dear. We all know how powerfully our rights to free speech, freedom of religion, our private property rights, our right to bear arms are protected because they are recognized and protected in the Bill of Rights section of our state and federal constitutions. Well, what we are looking to do is give that same most powerful protection to our rights to a clean and healthy environment. Now, why do we need this new path for environmental protection here in New Mexico, as well as in other states across the nation? After all, New Mexico and everywhere has a rich pre-existing body of laws, right? There are all kinds of legislation, regulations, policies, programs, agencies in New Mexico and beyond that are all supposed to be dedicated to environmental protection for all the people. So why is it that we need something new? Why do we need a New Mexico Green Amendment? Well, without going into all the ins and outs of how those laws work and why they're fundamentally failing us, and as attorney, I'm certainly happy to do that, but don't need to do that because all we really need to do is look at what's happening on the ground in the state of New Mexico. And we can see that this system of laws is not fully and fairly doing the job of protecting our water, our air, our lands, our landscapes, our environments in New Mexico so that all people can live happy, healthy lives. And unfortunately, environmental racism and environmental inequities are as alive and well in the state of New Mexico as they are in other states across the nation. And so we can see by what's happening on the ground in terms of the environment that something is missing from this system of laws and regulations. And what I am here to suggest, and what Representative Ferrari and Senator Pope and Senator Cedillo Lopez and all of our legislative champions and powerful supporters are here to suggest, is that what we are missing is meaningful, enforceable, constitutional recognition of the rights of all the people of New Mexico to a clean and healthy environment. Now, and doing that, raising up those environmental rights to that highest powerful, most powerful constitutional positioning. Now, we already have 3 states in the nation, Pennsylvania, Montana, and now the state of New York, that do in fact raise up environmental rights to this highest level. And in fact, New York only secured their Green Amendment just a few short weeks ago. On November 2nd, 2021, the people of New York voted 70% to 30% to actually add a constitutional Green Amendment to their Bill of Rights. But there are also other states across the nation. There are 12 states at this point that have put forth Green Amendment proposals similar to what New Mexico is talking about, but also different. Every state that's advancing a Green Amendment is looking at different language. All the states that are considering Green Amendments are trying to figure out what's the right language for them. But I can tell you that all of them are looking to the state of New Mexico and the tremendous leadership in the crafting of the language, in the grassroots activism, in the legislative leadership that is happening in New Mexico. And New Mexico is really emerging as a model in the National Green Amendment movement. Now, in order to be a Green Amendment, in order to have this highest constitutional protection, there are some key fundamentals that are really essential. Some are non-negotiable, some are fundamentally important if you want to have this highest constitutional standing. And all of these elements are actually found in the New Mexico language. So I just want to cite or highlight a few of the most powerful needs to get this highest constitutional protection. The provision has to be in the Bill of Rights section of the Constitution. That is non-negotiable. If you want your environmental rights to be on par with those other fundamental rights, they literally have to have the same posture and positioning legally as those other fundamental rights. And so that Bill of Rights placement is essential. We must be clearly recognizing the rights of all people, including future generations, to the life-sustaining elements of the environment, things like clean water and clean air, and the fundamentally important qualities of the environment, like the natural, cultural, and human health qualities of the environment. We must ensure that we are protecting the individual rights of all the people to a clean and healthy environment, but that we are also recognizing the duty and obligation of all government officials to protect the natural resources of the state and secure those environmental rights for all the people. And we need language that's self-executing. Legally, meaning that the language has legal standing and enforceability on its own. As soon as the language gets added to the Constitution, if there's a gap in the law, if there's a problem with existing law is being implemented or enforced, people feel that their constitutional rights to a clean and healthy environment are being infringed upon, they can then turn to the language in the Constitution to seek out the protection that they want and need. Now, broad strokes, what would it mean to have a Green Amendment in New Mexico? How would it change things? Well, it literally means that, again, those environmental rights are given that highest constitutional and legal standing. And I've already gone over that, so I won't go over that again. It means that we will refocus, reorient government decision-making. So it's really focused on prevention of pollution and environmental degradation from day one of the decision-making process. As with all of the other fundamental rights in the Bill of Rights section of the Constitution, whenever government officials are engaged in governing or decision-making, they always begin from a place of their oath to uphold the Constitution of the state. And that means that from day one, they are making sure that they are not unconstitutionally infringing on all the rights in the Bill of Rights section of the Constitution. And you can only do that. You can only fulfill your constitutional obligation if from day one of decision-making, you are oriented in a way that you are seeking to secure and protect the fundamental rights of the people. In the environmental context, that means that you are looking to prevent pollution, prevent environmental degradation from the beginning of the decision-making process and throughout the decision-making process, so you don't overstep the constitutional limitation. It means that really government officials are thinking long-term. They are thinking generationally. They're not thinking about, well, we can use up the natural resources of today and leave the leftovers for future generations. If you're constitutionally bound to protect the environmental rights of present and future generations, it means that you have to protect those rights equitably, which means that you have to be thinking about how can I protect the environmental rights of future generations on par with, equitably with, the environmental rights of present generations. Environmental justice will be tremendously strengthened because now every individual in the state, regardless of race, ethnicity, or socioeconomics, will have the same constitutional right to a clean and healthy environment. And all government officials at every level of government will be constitutionally bound to protect the environmental rights of all the people equitably. When you have a constitutional green amendment, you can no longer have environmental sacrifice zones. The Green Amendment will, in fact, as Representative Ferrari indicated, become a strong foundation for good new protections that are needed, but it will also strengthen the existing protections that are in place. The law books in New Mexico don't just get thrown out of the window when we pass or add the Green Amendment to the state constitution, but now the existing laws have to all be interpreted and applied through the lens of how can they be acted upon and enforced in a way that is in service to supporting the constitutional obligation to protect the environmental rights of all the people. So you can really strengthen how those laws are utilized. If there's a gap in the law, if there's something that's not regulated, like PFAS, which so many of us have heard about so often, contaminating so many people's water, right? PFAS got into the environment because there was an absence of law. There was an absence of protection. Well, if you have a constitutional green amendment that protects the rights of all the people to clean water, when you have an absence of law that could have such serious consequences on the water, on the environment, on the human health of the people, they could now turn to the constitutional right to fill the gap until hopefully the legislators and the regulators catch up. Our Green Amendment movement in New Mexico, is supported by a powerful, growing group of legislative champions. We have we have 23 legislative champions at this point, and more are coming on board all the time. And we have over 40 organizations. I think there are 45 at this point. 2 of them are missing from this slide. 45 organizations, New Mexico organizations that have banded together to advance this powerful movement. This is the language that we're talking about right now. This is the language that was put forth in the 2021 legislative session. This is sort of the starting place for our legislative champions, and they are certainly interested in and listening to all of the good feedback that they're getting from people. But to be really clear, this language would be added to Article 2, Section 25, and it would recognize and protect the rights of all the people of the state to the natural, inherent, and inalienable right to a clean and healthy environment, including water, air, soil, flora, fauna, ecosystems, and climate. And it would protect the natural, cultural, scenic, and human health qualities of the environment. Every government officials, the state, including all of its political subdivisions, would serve as trustee of the natural resources of New Mexico and would be constitutionally required to conserve, protect, and maintain these resources for the benefit of present and future generations. And the language is very explicit that it is self-executing. So I think at that, looking at time, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop. I'm not going to actually talk about some of those examples in Pennsylvania and Montana because I want to make sure we leave plenty of time for Senator Pope and plenty of time for Q&A. And if questions lead me to talk about those cases, I will. And if they don't, then nobody was interested in hearing about them anyway. So I'll stop the screen share and turn the podium to Senator Pope.
Thank you, Maya. And I think you've covered so much. And thanks, Representative Ferrari, as well. I think I just want to speak about why I support this and why this is so important. We've heard for too long that we're not doing enough to protect our environment, our air, our land, our water, and especially protecting it for future generations. This will allow us to hold everyone accountable because it'll be in the Constitution. That includes me. That includes our legislators. That includes our governor. So when we're making decisions and policy, we're going to have to look to this and make sure that we are protecting our environment for present and future generations. I think for too long, especially here in New Mexico, when we live in a state with that profits off the extractive industry, that for far too long, our environment has been harmed and the people that live in those communities have been harmed. Because when you look at it, where these industries are at, a lot of times they are at where low income people live in our BIPOC communities. They're left suffering with a terrible environment and the healthcare impacts that it leaves them with higher cancer rates, low birth rates. There are so many issues that our communities are dealing with. Now, this will not alleviate what's happened in the past, but going forward, it will provide that prevention. I think right now we're doing a lot of policy, we're doing laws that are not in the Constitution that in some ways try to hold people who harm our environment accountable. But a lot of times that does not alleviate the situation and the damage that's been done. So my hope in doing this, that we can prevent further damage and protect our environment for future generations, because they're asking for it. Our youth are standing up, they're marching, and they're asking us to do something. They really are. And I got to tell you on a personal note, I'm embarrassed about it because I feel like myself, my generation, we didn't do enough. And look what we're leaving them. So for me, this was easy to get behind this because this is something we can do and we can accomplish. So we're going to need your help to get this passed. Maya brought it up that we have 23 Senate and House sponsors on this bill, but we need more. Folks on the call understand how our legislature works. Even with that high a number, we have to make sure they get through committees, and we have to make sure they get through certain committees and certain committee chairs. So we're going to need that help there. So that means the community, grassroots, nonprofits, everybody involved, and we have that support, but we still need help because there is misinformation out there. There are people getting told this will do this will do that. And we'll answer some of those questions today to make sure that doesn't happen. But we're going to need your help to get this passed. The way the process is going to work is this is a constitutional amendment. It doesn't have to be on the call, and it's going to be brought forward by the lead sponsor, Senator Cedillo Lopez, in the 22 30-day session. It will have to pass whichever number of committees it's assigned in the House, pass the House floor, go through the certain number of Senate committees, pass the Senate. Once that is done, because it's a joint resolution, it does not have to go to the governor's desk. From that point on, it passes the House, the Senate, the two chambers, but then it has to go to the voters. So this is a fight to get this passed in our legislature. But once we get done there, we have to get it passed by the voters. And I'm always a person that's straight up and honest about stuff. This is going to be a tough fight. Right now, we have folks that are fighting what happened with the ETA, and that's the Green New Deal. That's what they're doing right now. So we're going to have people throwing money at this, trying to stop this, using every excuse in the book, talking about the cost of this, how it's going to take away jobs and how we're not going to have money to pay for schools. But my pushback on that is, what is the cost to our environment to continue to do what we're doing? What is the cost to the health of our communities in our state by doing nothing? Those costs are not only immediate, but they're long-term, and we've already been paying for that. So I hope that we can continue to spread this word. I hope we can get everyone here on board. Maya will be able to answer some questions, but we need your help. I'm not going to sugarcoat it and say this is a done deal, because it's not. I think we have a lot of people on board. We're going to do all we can to get this passed, but this is not going to be something that's done just by the legislators. We're going to need everyone on board to get this passed. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator Pope and Maya and Representative Ferrari. That's a wonderful overview. Maya, you talk 100 miles an hour, but it's really concise and parsimonious, and thank you. There's an awful lot of information in the chat for people. We will save that chat. I'm speaking for Sandy, and people can access that. We've got some questions that came in from some lawyers, and it seems like that's a group that's the most concerned about this. Primarily, the question is, why are we turning protection of our environment over basically to lawyers? we've got that we're going to put the protection in the Bill of Rights, the Green Amendment in the Bill of Rights. But then I guess the way that you take action is to sue. Is that correct, Maya? Or whomever wants to answer.
Yeah. Well, if Representative Ferrari or Senator Pope would like to go first, I'm happy to give them the ground first.
I think I would yield to you, Maya.
Okay. Well, actually, you said you think lawyers have concerns about this. Maybe some lawyers, but many, many lawyers, and those who really appreciate the importance and value of the richness that constitutional protection can bring to the law, they actually really appreciate and value this approach. And we see that in Pennsylvania, in Montana, in New York, and we see that in New Mexico. I was just speaking with a group of lawyers the other day from New Mexico, really recognizing the powerful contribution that constitutional protection brings to environmental protection. And we're absolutely not turning and adding the Green Amendment to the Bill of Rights section of the Constitution. This is not turning the environmental protection over to the lawyers and to the courts. This is actually returning the power to the people. And that's fundamentally what the Constitution is. The Constitution is sort of the contract that the people have with their government. More than that, it's the guidance that the people give to their government. And when people add provisions to the Bill of Rights section of their Constitution, they are making very clear to the government officials in the state and saying, listen, when we give you permission to govern over us, we are putting some limitations on that governance. We are putting in place some parameters. We are making sure that our fundamental rights are not to be infringed upon by your overreach. And what we are doing now with the New Mexico Green Amendment is we are simply adding those fundamental human rights to clean water, clean air, a stable climate, and a healthy environment to the sort of, you may not infringe upon these rights limitations that the people are simply confirming for their government officials. Now, the way the Constitution actually operates, right? First off, it is the power of the people. And again, be very clear, the Bill of Rights section is not a new grant of authority to government officials. It is actually a restraint on government. It is saying you may, when you govern, you may not infringe on these fundamental rights, just like you may not infringe on free speech rights or due process rights or private property rights. It functions the same way for the environment. So that's really powerful and that's really important. But the way the Green Amendment will be put into play and given sort of its life in the day-to-day lives of the people of New Mexico is the same way the other provisions are given life. It will start, in fact, with the government officials. The legislators and the regulators will seek to define what it means to have a constitutional right to a clean and healthy environment through the passage of legislation and regulations, through permitting, through their day-to-day decision-making, through their enforcement actions by the Attorney General's office. And when we, the people, believe that our government officials got it right in the crafting of that law or in the implementation of that law, then we will simply allow it to go forth. But when we believe that our government officials have got it wrong, that they have overreached in the crafting or in the implementation of those laws, then we, the people, will in fact be able to turn to the courts and get their assistance in sort of parsing out where there's a problem and where there isn't a problem. The actual language of the New Mexico Green Amendment had some really powerful guidance in it that will help legislators, regulators, and the courts and the people figure that out. The trust language brings some real clarity on what are the duties and the responsibilities of government officials. What constitutional standard principles of constitutional and legal interpretation will bring some real clarity to what it means to have a constitutional right to a clean and healthy environment when we do have to have those legal challenges or conversations. What's happening in Pennsylvania, Montana, and New York will also help inform that. When there is a legal challenge, when appropriate, there'll be a lot of deference will be given to government officials and decision-making in the environmental context, just like in every other context. But it is always really important that we do have the ability to turn to the courts when there's a problem. And there's no reason to be thinking that in the case of environmental rights, we are somehow doing a disservice by including the Constitution and the courts in this process. That it's a problem in the environmental context when we really appreciate it and applaud it in all the other contexts where we're dealing with fundamental inalienable rights. I mean, they really are one and the same. We appreciate having that opportunity to turn to the courts when necessary, when we're talking about civil rights and due process rights. We really appreciate that opportunity when we need it, when we're talking about environmental rights as well. So it's really a positive. And it's striking to me that any good lawyer who really understands how the law works would think of it as a negative.
Well, I was a little surprised too, but I'm not a lawyer. And
I am.
I heard from a couple of them and we wanted to address their concerns.
Absolutely.
Sandy?
I was going to say thank you for answering that question, Maya, because I'm not an attorney and I just dress like one, so I can't answer that question.
And I'm only married to one, but by osmosis, I couldn't have done a better job than Maya just did in explaining that. And we hope that with the Green Amendment and being in the Constitution, that it will help guide our officials, from us as legislators down to state and even water and conservation boards, to do the right thing and for protecting the land, air, and water of our state and for the health of our state.
And I do want to emphasize that's such an important point, right? Like in the first instance, all government officials, right? They raise their hand and take an oath of office to uphold the Constitution. And so that's the beauty of the Constitutional Green Amendment, is it means that in their day in and day out deliberations and work, all government officials will be prioritizing environmental protection and environmental rights. And by giving it that priority placement, we will actually be avoiding the need for the aid of the courts. But I do want to assure people, what we can see in Pennsylvania and Montana is there isn't some massive rush to litigation, right? Lawyers do not irresponsibly, nor do people irresponsibly use a constitutional green amendment when they secure this powerful protection. First off, for lawyers to do that would be foolish, right? You don't want to bring frivolous lawsuits. It's bad. It's bad for business and it's bad for your law license as well as for your reputation, and you can get in serious trouble. So we don't see lawyers bringing frivolous lawsuits. We see them bringing serious and important legal challenges when appropriate and when necessary. And what we can see in Pennsylvania and Montana, and I've literally done the count along with my team, is that we see year in and year out in Pennsylvania and Montana, you see between 3 and 9 lawsuits a year where the Green Amendment is relied upon in litigation. And these are actually cases that would have been brought anyway, but the Green Amendment becomes an additional powerful contribution to the legal challenge. But even freestanding 3 to 9 lawsuits a year is not all that many when you're really talking about the health, safety, and sanctity of people's lives and our environment.
We have a couple of questions in the Q&A. Ed Lovato is asking, what will the remedy be when an elected official breaches their duty to protect New Mexico's natural resources as required under this amendment? And how will such a breach be defined in the law?
So for the most part, what the goal is and what we experience are what we call equitable remedies, right? And so when there's a constitutional violation, government has to change its behavior in whatever ways necessary to end the violation. So if they've issued a permit that demonstrably results in a constitutional violation, right? I won't give any examples. Let's just go with that. Then the experience in Pennsylvania and Montana has been is that permit actually gets rescinded. It gets voided until and or if the state is able to remedy that constitutional violation and issue a permit that will protect environmental rights, fulfill their constitutional duty, and permit whatever the activity is. If there's the passage of legislation that is demonstrably unconstitutional, then those provisions can be challenged using the Constitutional Green Amendment. And if it is found that there is a constitutional violation, then as we have successfully done when challenging a piece of legislation in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, those unconstitutional portions of the law get extracted out, right? Because they're unconstitutional. The rest of the law was able to withstand the challenge, but those problematic provisions were removed. When in Pennsylvania, we were able to demonstrate that the state's failure to enforce existing law to secure cleanup of a decades-old toxic site with a spreading pollution plume, and instead to be working on a deal with a developer to allow development of this still toxic site, we were able to demonstrate that the failure of Pennsylvania to enforce that existing law to secure that cleanup by those, frankly, big, deep pocket known responsible parties, that failure to secure that cleanup and undertake that enforcement, that was a constitutional violation. And now, as a result, we are finding cleanup of the site for the benefit of the people. So those are just a few examples. Now, one of the questions and the concerns that has come up since last year is when the original New Mexico Green Amendment was proposed, the Civil Rights Act had not yet been passed. It actually, it may have already been proposed, but it certainly hadn't been passed. And so the language that I put up on the screen was the language that was put forth in 2021. The Civil Rights Act is now passed, where there is now the opportunity also as a remedy for money damages in certain circumstances. So the legislative champions, right, the sponsors, Senator Pope, Representative Ferrari, Senator Cedillo Lopez, have been taking input on both sides of that issue about how people feel about that provision in the Civil Rights Amendment, how it would play out in a Green Amendment context, and whether or not there's any way that they think would be appropriate to respond to it. So I think that's probably a pretty well-rounded answer.
Okay, well, Ed Lovato, if you're not happy with that, please ask another question. Thank you so much, Maya. We've got another one from Julian Lev. I would like to hear about the practical impact this amendment would have upon citizens of New Mexico. What will it look like from day to day? It will be a lot easier to sell if people know how to fill their gas tanks and where the petroleum will be taken out of the ground. Until then, I'm afraid it will be aspirational and otherwise hard to enforce.
Senator, Representative, would you like to offer thoughts or?
Well, I think as we're looking at how we kind of like fuel switching, trying to use less oil and gas by increasing electric vehicles and charging stations throughout our state, how we are trying to also, fuel switching where we use more electricity and solar generation rather than heating with gas, but switching to heat pumps. I think all of these things are more like our day-to-day. And the Green Amendment will make it so that we are more prone to use more environmentally safe and protective energy production and start seeing a movement. Well, we already are in our state very, with the governor's support going to these other clean energy productions that will make it so that we see it more in electric vehicles and less gas usage and changing it to clean electricity.
For me, I think day to day, in some cases you might not notice, but I think overarching, there's just policy decisions are being made because of this amendment. So For example, there's the talk right now of going to, was it blue hydrogen? And the discussion now is we should be doing, if we go that route, that we should be doing green hydrogen. Other people are saying, well, why are we doing that? We need to just, that's kind of a step before we went to full electricity and EVs. So we should just be going that route. I think having the amendment really shapes our policy going forward to not make decisions that are detrimental to our environment and our communities. So day to day, you might not see, what's going on when you fill your gas tank up, but I think you're rest assured that the transition and the decisions we're making and moving towards renewable energy and to cleaner fuel systems, I think are being made probably in a more impactful, more careful, and probably in a faster way to that transition, because we won't be allowed to kind of make decisions that in the short term might be saving money, or they might be, decisions being made by industry. This is something that's a constitutional amendment that will be protecting people.
Yeah, and I think such important points, and really, as Representative Ferrari and Senator Pope made very, very clear, is your day-to-day lives will be impacted, but not in that direct way, right? You're not going to see big government reaching in and fiddling around in your life. That's part of the point of being a restraint on government action, right? Is to protect yourself from that. But your day-to-day life is going to be impacted. This is not an aspirational statement. Well, it is an aspirational statement because this is something we're going to be striving for, but legally, it is very clear. It has very clear procedural and substantive legal obligations that get put in play when you have a constitutional green amendment. And when your government officials demonstrably fail to fulfill their substantive and procedural obligations, right, then there will be a violation and it can be remedied. It will need to be remedied in the courts if that can be demonstrated. But as Senator Pope just said, you're not going to feel it day in and day out. You're not going to necessarily be able to, well, you're not going to be able to see it, but you're going to feel it. Think about your rights to freedom of religion. Think about your rights to free speech. Think about your civil rights. The fact that if you get pulled over by a police officer, they can't immediately be fiddling around in your car, or they can't just walk right up to your front door and walk right in. Or if you want to go testify somewhere where you have a right to free speech, you're not doing anything unconstitutional. You're not yelling fire right in a crowded movie theater. You have the right to speak. You have a right to exercise your religious freedoms every single day, because of the constitutional rights that are protected by the Bill of Rights section of your state constitution. So you're not thinking day in and day out about the powerful benefits you get from the constitutional protection of your other fundamental rights. So similarly, you're not going to be thinking day in and day out, like, wow, my right to clean water and clean air is playing out this way in this day. But as your water stays protected, or your air gets cleaner and cleaner, as you start to see powerful protections come into play for the environment in the instance of PFAS contamination, for example, then you're going to know, even in the back of your mind, you might not realize, but you're going to know that you're getting those powerful additional protections because of the constitutional green amendment. And if you are in one of those communities, if you're in one of those sacrifice zones already, that's already overburdened by massive quantities of air pollution that are striking at the heart of your life and your livelihood and your health, your safety and your safety and sanctity. And industry wants to come in and put another industrial operation spewing pollution that's going to come into your already disproportionately impacted and compromised community. You're going to be able to say, I have a constitutional right to clean air. Not only do you have to clean up, every time a new permit comes up, do you have to deal with the existing pollution that's already compromising my health and the health of my children? But guess what? You may have a very strong constitutional claim to say the way that industrial operation is being proposed, these operations in this location with this already overburdened air quality, that's a constitutional violation that has to be remedied, that has to be addressed. If you live in that community and you get to use the New Mexico Green Amendment in that most powerful way, well, on that day, you're going to be like, wow, I do clearly see how it benefits me. So we're all going to experience it differently, but as the environment in New Mexico gets better and better protected, as better decisions are being made, better laws are being advanced, gaps in the laws are being addressed, environmental justice becomes a reality in the state because of the Green Amendment, you're going to know at some point, you're going to have a recognition, wow, these things are happening because our legislators and then we, the people, passed that constitutional Green Amendment. So it did benefit me day in and day out. It wasn't just aspirational. It was powerful and it was important and it made a difference.
That's a very good answer. And as Julian is saying in the questions and answers here, strong supporter, but we have to convince people. And Maya, I think the message you just gave us about our rights is going to be wonderful once this gets through the legislative session. And we have to have that ground campaign to let people know how this is going to impact them. Sandy, we've got a couple more questions in the Q&A. Would you like to read them?
Sure. The first one that we have up, or the one that we have up next, is from Steffi Weisberg. Could managers of public pensions and foundations be held liable for investing in fossil fuel companies that operate in New Mexico and cause harm to communities and through climate change cause an increase in water shortages?
Madam Chair, my apologies. I have to go for another Zoom. I have to jump off, but I just want to say goodbye. I'm sorry I have to jump off. And I just want to close to say there's a big discussion across this country and this state about rights. So let's just add this one to that discussion that we're having right now under this pandemic. So
thanks so much,
everyone.
Senator. Thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
And I apologize, I need to go also. So thank you. And I know Maya will do a great job of answering the final two questions.
I'll channel you. I'll
Okay.
channel you.
Thank you, Representative Ferrari. Really appreciate your time tonight.
Oh, my pleasure. And thank you all for your interest in this really important amendment that we really need for our state and to protect people and the land and air, water, that's so vital for our survival. So thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you.
So Claudia, thanks for making the point about the power and the importance of the grassroots movement. And whoever made that comment in the chat, 100%, absolutely. And that's why we do have a New Mexico Green Amendment Coalition. And all of those 45 organizations are really active and engaged. And if you go to nmgreenamendment.org, you can get involved with the movement. There are hands-on things we need you to do right now, today, to spread the word, sharing door hangers, handing out postcards, getting people to sign petitions. Most importantly, getting people to call their legislators and say, hey, sponsor this, support this, or if you already have, thank you. So my little plug for that. In terms of the pensions, look, the couple of things. First off, the Green Amendment certainly isn't going to be an instant panacea for all environmental ills in the state, right? It's going to take time. It's going to take time to put it into play and to understand how it works in each individual context. And every time we get a better understanding of how it works, we'll be setting precedent for all the decisions to follow. So I do want to make that clear, right? So that's going to be important. And we're all going to need to take this Green Amendment constitutional right to heart, and we're going to need to put it to work. So that's the second part of the grassroots, right? Not just getting it, but then powerfully implementing it. When it comes to the public pensions, to be honest with you, I don't know enough about how that operates. If you're talking about private pension managers, you're talking about public pensions, but if you're talking about, private pension managers, they're not government officials. If I'm interpreting that right, and again, I don't know how the pension system operates, but I just sort of make that observation is remind people that this impacts government officials, government decision-making, government action and activities. So that's sort of like a first question that always has to be asked. Is this a government action or activity? And then we would have to look at everything in context to see whether or not one can make a constitutional claim. But I have to be honest, I don't clearly see a challenge in what you're suggesting, but I don't know enough about what you have in mind or how that pension system operates to really fairly be able to answer it beyond saying, I don't instantly see a pathway, but I don't know enough.
I think that the main gist of Steffi's question is, we want to divest
Mhm.
of supporting fossil fuels, and we don't want pension funds to be invested in fossil fuels. So, for example, their UNM Foundation is investing in fossil fuels, and that's being challenged because it doesn't jive with their governing values and principles. So,
yes, and I hear you totally about the whole divestment movement. And that is the basis upon which I say I don't immediately see a pathway, right? Not everything, just because it has environmental implications, doesn't mean it rises to a constitutional level. Doesn't mean you have the direct nexus necessary to support constitutional standing. There are a lot of elements. And so like I said, I don't instantly see it. I don't know what you have in mind. So I'm not going to presume to say 100% no, but I just wanted to remind people the environment is impacted in a lot of ways by a lot of things. Not everything's going to rise to a constitutional level, even though there are things that are really important to us that we really need to change and want to change. It doesn't mean that we're going to be using the Constitution to drive that change.
we have two more questions. Athena is asking, will the Green Amendment stop fracking and oil and gas operations?
So one of the things to know is fracking is already in New Mexico, just like fracking is already in Pennsylvania, and was already in Pennsylvania when Pennsylvania's Green Amendment got legal life, right? When it came really into being. And so the simple passage of the Green Amendment doesn't mean poof, that bad whatever you're envisioning evaporates. If something is already there in operation, then the way the Green Amendment is going to come into play is it's going to come into play in a situation by situation, case by case basis. So, for example, it might result in more environmental protections from fracking operations, existing fracking operations, when they come up for new permits and new permitting. They may be subject to more environmentally community beneficial limitations or restrictions. There may be a situation where a new operation is being proposed. Maybe there will be a constitutional claim that new operation actually shouldn't be allowed given existing conditions or its proximity to an already existing environmental sacrifice zone. In the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, where we already had fracking, we had the passage of a piece of state legislation that was going to exponentially increase that industry by putting in place automatic waivers from environmental protection standards, undermining local zoning or preempting really local zoning or authority. So there weren't really going to be limitations on where fracking operations could take place. In fact, by virtue of state law, they had to be allowed to happen everywhere in the state, including in the heart of residential communities. So there were all these overzealous, overreaching elements of this new piece of legislation that was going to take a very bad industrial situation and make it exponentially worse. through the Green Amendment, we prevented those provisions of the law from going into play. So we didn't get rid of the fracking that was already on the ground, but we prevented that massive expansion that would have happened. Right now, there are different contexts and situations within fracking having to do with zoning or permitting or other limitations where the constitutional environmental right is being brought to bear and is having impacts. And every time there's an impact, again, we set a precedent that impacts every operation or proposed permit to come. But it certainly has not wiped out the industry from the state. We're learning now over time, and we've only had our Green Amendment for a number of years now, since our victory in December of 2013. But we're learning how it's going to impact that industry and other industries, and it is having a powerful, meaningful effect, but it has not resulted in the displacement of that industry, because the industry was there first. I do believe in my heart of hearts, knowing how powerful the Green Amendment is, if we had a living Green Amendment before fracking came to Pennsylvania, I believe we could have used the Green Amendment to keep it out, but it was there first. So now we're having to use the Green Amendment within that pre-existing context to get better and better protections and better decisions. And we'll see how powerfully it plays out over time.
Okay. Greg Seeley says, very inspiring. I want to know more about the barriers this amendment is facing and how we can help impact its passage.
Love that question and that enthusiasm and that delivery, Claudia. So I think, so there's the obvious barrier and then the not so obvious barrier, right? So the first barrier is we need a majority of the legislators in each of the legislative houses during the 30-day session to vote in support of it. So that means we need hearings. We need the Green Amendment to be voted out of those committee meetings. And there's likely to be two committees in each house that's going to have to vote on it. And then, of course, we need the whole floor to vote on it. So we're going to need people to be really active and engaged with their legislators to make very, very clear that the people of New Mexico want this and expect this, and only want people in elected office who will stand in support of this kind of constitutional amendment, and to make that really clear to their elected leaders. So that's sort of the overt, that's what we need. But we know that there are going to be, the opposition is going to be operating behind the scenes. Industry of all kinds are going to be talking in the ears of the legislators. And so it's really important that we, the people, our voices overwhelm the voices of those private interests that are really more interested in their own profits than they are in the health and the safety of people of New Mexico, the environment, and future generations. So we have to overwhelm those voices. And I think that's what's going to be most powerful and most important. And that requires people power and day in and day out engagement. And so if you're willing to join with us in doing that, we'd love to have you. You could go to your local town council, or organization or civic organization and urge the passage of a resolution in support of the Green Amendment that could go to your legislators. You could be making those calls, spreading the word, really helping us get engaged. If you go to nmgreenamendment.org, there's so many opportunities, and we need your voice because, again, we need the people's voice to be the most important voice in the room, because truly yours is the most important voice. That Constitution is your power. That's all about you, the people, and you telling government how you want them to operate. And the passage of the Green Amendment is really in this environmental realm, the people taking the power back, which is appropriate.
Perfect. Well, we happen to have a group of people who are interested in this, so we will talk offline and see what we can do to influence it. I want to thank you so much for your time this evening You've got energy. This is a wonderful initiative, and we really wish you success with it. I do know that there are a few people who still have some reservations, so let's work together and see if we can have that conversation with them, Maya.
Yeah,
That'd be great.
absolutely. 100%.
Okay.
And just to be clear, right, we all are always going to have reservations about things, but we have to look at the bigger picture and the greater good. And there really is no downside to truly protecting what is a fundamental human right. None of us survive without clean water, clean air, a stable climate, or healthy environments. So it's appropriate that we recognize them and protect them in the same way we protect those other human rights we hold dear. So thank you for the opportunity and for joining forces. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, and you're welcome to stay on board. We have two people who are going to talk to us about work that they are doing that is relevant for veterans, and they're both running for office. So thank you so much, Maya. And Laura Montoya, ma'am, we'd love to hear what you have going on with veterans. I love all the stuff that you were doing for veterans on Veterans Day, but I know that's one day a year, and you'd spend more time than one day a year helping our veterans.
Thank you very much. Can you all see my screen? Okay, perfect. So
Yes.
I'm Laura Montoya. I'm happy to be a part of this caucus. I wanted to start off by telling you a little bit of where the passion for helping veterans comes from. So I'm from northern New Mexico. I was born and raised and educated in Las Vegas. My dad's from Mora. And when I was growing up, well, everyone's a veteran for the most part. So I sent you all a video the other day for Veterans Day, wishing you all a happy Veterans Day. But I sent you a little book to share with your grandkids or kids, or just for yourself, about how sometimes all the people we meet throughout the day and we interact with really are veterans that serve our community in all different kinds of ways still at this time. So growing up there, I became very involved in the Close-Up program, going to Washington, D.C. in high school, sold a lot of suckers to get there. And later on, ended up taking in an internship with U.S. Senator Jeff Bingaman. And I really loved the work that they were doing. So I applied for the position, and I got to be a constituent services representative managing 5 counties in northern New Mexico as the youngest Latina woman in the United States. And I was taught very fast that even though we work on all federal issues, northern New Mexico had more veterans per capita than anywhere else in the United States at the time. And all of our cases, a percentage of them, dealt with veteran issues. Many of our veterans did not get their DD 214. They didn't get a lot of their benefits. Agent Orange was something sort of new that people were giving them a hard time to get any of their funds for. We had a lot of veterans who had PTSD and didn't want to talk to anyone. So we developed a program that a veteran would be the one to have the work groups, or like a group of just veterans being able to talk. No one else could be in there about some of the things that they went through while they were overseas. And it was really beneficial. So this picture that you're looking at, I'm the girl on the right-hand side with the veteran with his hand over my shoulder. The other girl worked for the VA, and they used to get us confused if they weren't a veteran. Like, people in our community would somehow get us confused, but the veterans knew exactly who we were. This was a celebration of honoring some of our veterans, giving them their DD 214 their medals that they got from getting the DD 214. So many of you might recall when they would say that they all got burnt in a fire and whatever else. It was a lie from my experience. I made good relations with some federal folks, and I was able to get a lot of them. And then we got their medals, and I saw Purple Hearts for the first time. And I even got to present some of them to some of the veterans if Jeff couldn't be there. So today, I am very passionate about helping veterans because I know that most of the time they never ask for help. They're very humble and they deserve it. And a lot of times I've gotten the frustration with the VA. I know last month we had a conversation and they said, well, those things have gotten better. And I hate to ever be negative Nancy about it, but they really haven't in a lot of cases. One of my veterans who is, we went to high school together, we've been best friends for a long time. He got hit by an IED and he's still in a wheelchair. Many of you have probably seen him on my Facebook. That's Toby. And they literally just told him 2 months ago, you've already gone through 3 wheelchairs, so you don't need to get another one. And I was furious. And they all felt the wrath, because that is not okay to tell a veteran after they served our country and they can't walk because of it. So I am still super duper passionate about it. Veterans Day for me is a special time. So I'll go to my Rio Rancho one usually if I'm not in Las Vegas. And then I'll go to the American Legion. And then I go to my group of Santa Fe VFW folks. Gilbert Romero is the commander right now. And we have a beautiful celebration. I invited Claudia for next year. We do karaoke on Fridays. Anyone who wants to go, let me know, because guess what? I get to be a VFW auxiliary person. They're doing my paperwork now. And I'm very thrilled about that. So I want to tell you a little bit about some services. Maybe you know about them, maybe you don't, maybe you know some of the history, but I think it's important, especially today, because the new tax year is going to come up in December, and you need to get this paperwork done before the end of the year. And there's some new laws and improvements to the law that we were able to do as me being the legislative chair for the Treasurers Affiliate. I was the Sandoval County Treasurer for 8 years, Legislative Treasurers Affiliate Chair for 8 years, and we got 21 bills passed. And some of them have been dealing with veterans. So when people tell you, well, you're not really in a position to help veterans, that's a total lie. No matter what position you're in, whether elected or in leadership of any kind of sort of way, you can always help veterans if you have the heart for it, or seniors, or whatever you're passionate about. Most of you should know that in New Mexico, if you have a home and this is your permanent residence, you have a 2,000 head of household exemption. That's for everyone. Then there's the $4,000 exemption. Back in the day, it was only 2,000, and then it went up to 4,000. And then there was an issue because when they developed the law, they didn't expect that more men and women would be veterans in the United States. And so we had to get clarification in the law that made it crystal clear that if 2 partners own the property, they can both get $4,000 off the exemption. And so that doesn't sound as if it's a lot, but it's off the assessed value. So I put over here an example of what I'm talking about. So I made it a little bit easier for mathematical purposes. If your house is valued at $300,000, the assessor will assess your property at 1/3 of that, which is $100,000. You get your head of household exemption, because everyone does. But if you have 2 veterans, husband, wife, whoever owns a house, maybe 2 sisters, 2 domestic partners, whatever the case may be, they both get $4,000. And we got that rule changed working with Tax and Revenue Property Tax Division a couple of years ago. And then that's $8,000. So in total, you got an exemption of some sort of $10,000. Now that might not sound like a lot, but when you're looking at only $90,000 multiplied by the tax rate, it is super significant, critical to any veteran. I'm going to go into 100% disabled veteran exemption as well. We got a bill passed that allows you to transfer that in the middle of the year, and I'll go into more detail. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about disabled or senior value freeze and special assessments, because those were all bills we got passed in the last recent years. So the veteran exemption, I put all of this extra in here for all of you so that hopefully when we send the presentation out, you can keep it for yourself. You can give it to other veterans, whatever groups and organizations you're part of. It'll help you to remember what you heard today. So that just verifies the $4,000. And as used in the section, a lot of people wonder, like, well, really, what is a veteran? What does that mean? And who does it include? So I added all that information in here for you. So 100% disabled veteran exemption. So we all know that if you have your honorable discharge papers, you have to go and take the paper that you get from the VA, you take it to the assessor's office, and then they'll process it through. Once they process it through, it won't go into effect until the next tax year. Now, if you did it, for example, since right now, like let's say you're a 100% disabled veteran and you didn't know about this. So today or tomorrow, you decide you're going to go to the VA and you're going to get your paperwork all verified. They sign the paper. It's like a little page certificate. You take it to the assessor's office, and it might take time to process through the VA. And let's say it doesn't happen till January 2nd. You will still get it for 2020. And even though the tax bill went out November 2020, they will fix it for you. Because remember, tax bills are always sent out in November for the current tax year. So the tax bill you got last week, that's for your 2020 taxes, and first half is due November 10th through December 10th. If you're 100% disabled, you don't have a property tax bill, at all. Now, in certain areas in Albuquerque and our Bernalillo County and Sandoval County, we have special districts. So back in the day, and by the way, the surviving spouse and the disabled veteran were married at the time of the disabled veteran's death. That's qualified, and surviving spouse continues to occupy the property continuously after the disabled veteran's death, gets to still keep that veteran exemption. If they get married, then they lose it. But there's also a side part to it. If it gets annulled, then you can go back to getting the exemption later. So in 2008, there was legislator from northern New Mexico, Tomas Garcia, who asked for a legal opinion from the Attorney General's office regarding property tax exemption for veterans with a disability. And that was very helpful. So if you're not familiar, any legislator or statewide elected official can ask for an opinion by the Attorney General. We as individuals cannot, but if you went through your senator, your state rep, your land commissioner, if it dealt with land, your secretary of state, if it deals with elections, whatever one you want to use, they can then send it to the AG, and then they'll do a legal opinion for you. And so this legal opinion helped the treasurer's affiliate and the assessor's affiliate to be able to come up with later assisting Senate Bill 248, which provides an exemption from the imposition of a special assessment. So what was happening is that I would get a tax bill that I sent to a 100% disabled veteran, and that person would come back and say, Laura, I thought I didn't have to pay my taxes. And then I'd research it and find out they lived in Cabazon or Mariposa, which is a special district, and it's an assessment, not a tax, but it's on your tax bill. So it was very confusing for veterans. And I thought, well, if you're going to put it on the tax bill, we should consider it a tax, even though I knew legally it's considered a special assessment. So we had to go before the legislature. Senator Sanchez was our sponsor, and he was able, along with many different sponsors or legislators that were very supportive of this, for us to be able to change the law to allow for any 100% disabled veteran exemption in New Mexico to include any special district. So then we had Senate Bill 506, Senator Payne, Republican, hardcore veteran, helped us with the bill that was to provide the option for a disabled veteran property tax exemption to remain or be transferred to the new property if they chose. So how did this come about? Well, funny you ask. So Toby was living down the street from me, and we had lost contact for a long time. And then he needed a special type of wheelchair. Well, that house wasn't qualified for wheelchair access, and his mom is the caregiver, but it still didn't help. So they needed to get a different house that had disability access, especially to the bathroom. And so they had to get a more expensive house. Now, sometimes there's other loan programs or assistance that the VA will do, or Wounded Warriors, which helped them too. But when we're doing transfers of land in every other situation, you can't transfer over any types of exemptions or anything else. And so we thought that it would be better if, for example, Claudia is a veteran. Well, she is, but so Claudia is the veteran, and she has to move to a $300,000 home. And right now she's in a $100,000 home. She's not paying the taxes off the $100,000 home, but since she has to move to the $300,000 home, she would have to pay usually prorated a certain amount based on how many months she lived in the house or if she moved into the house. So let's say it was in February, she's going to have to pay for 10 months worth of taxes. So instead, what we were able to do with the legislature and the governor's assistance is get that exemption and transfer it to her new house. she could choose. It's up to her. But since that one costs more, she could get that exemption on the $300,000 house and pay the taxes off the $100,000 house instead. And nowhere else in property taxes can you do that except for 100% disabled veterans. And that was partly how it came about. So this is where you can see that it's in the statute now. It's the part I highlighted in green. So remove the exemption for that residence and apply it to this disabled veteran or the disabled veteran's surviving spouse. Now, I wanted to make sure that I mentioned this because though it's not directly only for veterans, our veterans are seniors too. And so if, for example, you are a senior or one or the other, or disabled, this allows, if you have low income, you're over the age of 65 years or disabled, to have an automatic value freeze after being eligible for 3 consecutive years. So what we did is originally the law was already in effect for low income and disabled for 65 years in age for $32,000, but every year you had to go back. And for some of our seniors, they didn't either have a way to get there. They forget. I mean, I forgot what I did last week. They didn't have a ride. And it's only once a year, and it's during the winter year that you have to turn it in. And so if you're already 65 years of age, statistically, you have the same amount of income for the rest of your life, unless, of course, you won the lottery or something to that effect. So why would we make ourselves become inefficient as a government entity or like the assessor's office to keep doing the same paperwork over and over when you already know that their income is not going to change? So we changed the law to say after 3 years, this was Senator Benny Shenda who helped me with this one, because I knew he loved seniors a lot, and they all play bingo and Hemis. And so I thought, oh, he's great for this. So 3 consecutive years, you don't have to do it again. And if for some reason you won the lottery and you didn't say anything, then you can get in trouble for not saying something. Then a couple of years later, Bill Ream had a bill, and so did Senator Worth. And it was totally different from when we changed it and amended it. But the idea was to change it to $35,000. And that was because we calculated with property tax division what it should have been after all these years, because it never changed. And so that the legislature doesn't have to readdress this every couple of years or when the market changes or the economy changes, like a pandemic, we added in a consumer price index. So now our senior citizens will always be taken care of. Our disabled will always be taken care of because the consumer price index is included. So every year PTD during this time will look at the values that the assessors send. They'll look at the market, and then they'll determine whether or not that value needs to change before January 1 of the next year, so that the assessors can put it into their software system to change it for the new calendar year, property tax year. And so I wanted to make sure that all of you had all of that information. And then the last one was just on the AG's website, there's a lot of legal opinions. You can search for a certain thing that you're interested in. If you just want to put in veteran, believe me, there'll be tons. So you'll have to be more specific. But these were some of the questions. So I usually got asked question number 4 and number 5. Is a widow of a veteran who has been remarried eligible to claim the veteran exemption? And then there's the answer is no. But if they were to annul it, then the answer is yes. And that's where that information came in from the statute that I showed you earlier today. So I'm happy to be a part of this caucus. I'm happy to be someone that is passionate and loves our veterans because they've done so much for us and they continue to do it all the time. And so for me, it's a daily action of service.
Laura, that's fantastic. And I just want to make one comment. Tying it to the CPI is so intelligent. We need to do more in that so we don't have to keep upgrading and changing as prices change. It's really smart to do. That is fantastic. You've been so active and making positive change for veterans. We really appreciate it. We understand that you are running for office. Would you like to give us just a minute on what your future plans are?
Oh, sure. So I'm also running for state treasurer. I have 23 years of government experience. I really do believe experience matters. And because sometimes you learn from mistakes, either of yourself or your colleagues, and you are able to help with policy and other items. So, I mentioned legislative chair. I worked at the legislature for several years, which helped me be more prepared and also helped me build those relationships of trust. And so I'm very grateful that God has directed my life in a way that I can help in different ways for seniors too, because that's super important for me. Financial literacy is critical, and I have a lot of ideas on how. In fact, we're working on legislation right now for the 30-day session and checking to see if the governor will help us put out a special message for it, because it's 30 days is money legislative sessions unless you have that message. My website I'll put on inside the chat. I would love to have everyone's support. And if there's anything I can do to help any of you, I'd be happy to do it. I was Sandoval County Treasurer for 8 years, and I am ready to take this on. I was the treasurer before. I worked as the administrative assistant to Treasurer Doug Brown and James B. Lewis, and I'm ready to go back there and be the first woman of color, woman, period, and serve you.
Perfect. Thank you. And we will set up a forum so that we could have all candidates, as we get closer to the primary, come and have a conversation with us. Thanks so much for your time, Laura, and everything you're doing. Next, I am really happy to welcome Heather Benavides. And please share some of what you've been working on and what your future goals are.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, Claudia, and the rest of the fellow members of the Veterans and Military Families Caucus for the opportunity to speak to you this evening. My speech will be very, very short because I am expected as the Rules Chair at the Rules Committee meeting at 6:30. And so I hope that I will be invited back to go into greater detail about my candidacy for State Treasurer. I'm currently in the Treasurer's office now and have the endorsement of Treasurer Eichenberg, as well as some of the stuff that I've done for veterans, but that's actually what I'm here to talk about. And I just want to say first that I come from a very proud military family. My brother, Sean, just retired from the Army after 20 years, Master Sergeant, and he is stationed in Hawaii with his wife, who still has 2 years. And so we are very proud of the service that they have provided us. And I take every opportunity I can to brag about them because they are wonderful people. And my maternal grandfather retired from the Air Force. My paternal grandfather fought in the Korean War. And so when I say that taking care of our veterans and service members is important to me, I can't overstate that. It's a part of our life. And it's something that, regardless of where my public service takes me, it's always going to be part of what I do. And so I'll just go briefly into some of the volunteer work I've done and then what we're doing in the Treasurer's office right now, specifically the ABLE program to help veterans in the future. And so I was part of a service organization years ago, for about a decade, called the Pilot Club of Belen. And every year we would pick a fundraiser and we would pick a specific organization to work with to provide some kind of service to somebody in the community. And toward the end of my service with the Pilot Club, we decided to raise money to provide service animals or service dogs to from Paws and Stripes to veterans in our community. And it was very, very hard work to raise that much money because we had never really done that before. All of our projects had been a little bit smaller scale, but we were able to do it. And I cannot tell you how rewarding it was to be able to do that for these two gentlemen. And it was so successful that they're still doing it to this day. And so I am proud of having been a part of that. And it's something that I will support if I get the chance, but obviously I don't live in Valencia County anymore. So I'm not a part of the Pilot Club. But it's wonderful. And like I said, it's something that I will always support and be a part of. Now, I've been with the Treasurer's Office since 2017, and I am the person who implemented the ABLE New Mexico program, which stands for Achieving a Better Life Experience. And for those of you who don't know what it is, it's a program, a savings and investment account program that helps individuals living with disabilities to save their money without losing their benefits. Now, we all know somebody living with a disability. We all do. But what we all might not know, and this crowd probably does, is that certain individuals living with disabilities need benefits or receive benefits in order to survive based on their disability. And they can never have more than $2,000 in their name, or else they risk eligibility for that benefit. Now, I cannot imagine living with this limitation. I know how hard it must be. I know how difficult it must be for somebody to have to trust other people with their finances, trust other people with their money. I know how difficult it must be for them to have to spend down frivolously on things that they don't need in order to stay under that $2,000 limit. And frankly, it's unfair, it's unjust, and it further marginalizes an already challenged community. And so with the ABLE program, individuals with disabilities can open up ABLE accounts and save up to $15,000 in a year, and they can use that money for big ticket items, anything that relates to their disability or helps to maintain or improve their quality of life. And so when I say big ticket items, that can mean anything from a vacation, a vehicle, tuition for school, but it can also be things that their benefits won't pay for, like hearing aids. So hearing aids run about $5,000. Some Medicaid benefits won't pay for that. And so how does somebody who needs hearing aids save that money in their name? It's an untenable situation. Now, where this relates to veterans, there is an effort in Congress right now called the ABLE Age Adjustment Act. And if it passes, it will raise the age of eligibility from 26 to 46. And what that will do is open up this program to 8 million people nationwide, 1 million of those people being veterans who deserve to have access to this program to help with benefits they're already receiving. And so what we've done in the Treasurer's Office, it's been introduced twice. What we've done in the Treasurer's Office is we've spoken out to all of the New Mexico delegation to get them to co-sponsor this bill, because that's really what we need them to do. And the first time I went to now Secretary Holland, but she was Congresswoman Holland at the time, I went to her office and I talked to two amazing gentlemen and I explained to them how this would help. And immediately she co-sponsored the bill. And I'm so grateful for that. Unfortunately, it didn't pass, so it's been reintroduced. The Senate number is 331 and the House resolution is 1219. And if you'd be so inclined to talk to our New Mexico delegation and ask them to please sponsor this bill, it would help 1 million veterans in the country have access to this program so they can save without losing their benefits. Now we need Senators Lujan and Heinrich, and we need Congresswomen Stansberry and Ledger Fernandez to do this. And so I've got all the information handy. I can email it to you. I'd be happy to come back and talk in greater detail about this program, as well as the things we're doing in the Treasurer's Office. We have extensive financial literacy efforts. We are creating a retirement program called New Mexico Work and Save that will be available to individuals who are self-employed and who are employed by small businesses who don't have access to PARA or ERB or some other pension. I am a very proud PARA member, have been for 18 years. And so I know how important it is to have access to those benefits. And so I'm sorry that I'm going to have to shorten my time here today, because I have a lot more to say about my history, my education, my experience, and why I want to serve you as your next state treasurer. But most importantly, this ABLE New Mexico program can help veterans in New Mexico, and I am working to make that happen. But it's not going to happen with just the effort of one person. We all need to get in on this. And so any information that I can provide to you so that we can contact our New Mexico delegation and let them know how important this is to us, I'd be happy to do it. This can be a group effort, and I'll put my information in the chat, Madam Chair, if that's okay. And
Absolutely.
I hope
Please do, Heather.
Yeah, I hope to be able to come back again and talk in great detail about this, because there's a lot of information that I'm not able to get to right now because I simply have to get to the Rules Committee meeting. But I am Heather Benavides. I am running to serve you as your next state treasurer because I believe that investing in New Mexico's future begins with investing in our people and protecting our veterans. And that's what I'm here to do. And so I will go. I know my campaign manager is here, Rocky Cordova, and he has put—
Rocky, are you here?
Yes, he's put my
Yeah, okay,
information
great.
into the chat, and I would be very happy to provide that information. And Claudia, you and I have corresponded via the Treasurer's Office about this program specifically. And so what I'll do is I will, from that email account, because this is official business, I will make sure and get that information to you, and then we can disseminate it. But I would really love the opportunity to come back and give you the full ABLE presentation so you can understand, where it started, how we implemented it here in New Mexico, and how we see it moving forward. So would that be something that y'all be amenable to?
Heck yeah, we are able to do that.
Thank you.
And
Thank
I
you. I
would
love that.
love to get a write-up on what you're doing and any help that you need that we can put in the newsletter and we can put on the website. And we would love to have you come back and be a guest speaker and specifically talk about this, as well as come back when we have a forum for our treasurers. So
Wonderful.
thank you so much for your time, Heather. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. And I'm sorry I have to go, but I have to head over to the rules. And if there are any SCC members on the call tonight, which I know there are, make sure you guys vote. I know you got a wonderful email detailing how to do that. So if you have any questions, I am also the rules chair and I am here to help you. So thank you all so much. And you all have a lovely evening. And if I don't see you again, have a happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah. Thank you very much and happy Thanksgiving. Thanks so much for your time and your information. Really
Thank you. See you
helpful,
again soon.
Heather. I'm
See you
sorry
soon.
we didn't have time to get into some questions that are in the chat for now, but we've kind of wrapped it up with an hour and a half. And I'd just like to thank everybody so much for joining us this evening. I think it was wonderful to hear from the Green Amendment folks on what the benefits are, what our rights are. And it was really nice to hear how much Laura Montoya and Heather Benavides are already doing for veterans and want to continue to do as they seek to run for office. So I guess that's it, folks. I want to wish everyone a wonderful Thanksgiving.
Can I interrupt for just a moment? Is Laura still on? Or because there were some questions that were in the Q&A for her, if she's available. Otherwise, I can send them to her.
I think she's gone, and
Okay.
I think we can send them to her.
Okay.
She had to run to another meeting as well. Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks so much, everyone. Happy Thanksgiving. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.